Hello students, Mr. Young here with Chapter 24, Lesson 1, Part Deuce. Yesterday, we learned all about Europe carving up India and Asia. Today, Europe takes over Africa. And what the heck is the USA doing during this? We're going to find out on the very next page. This here is the Zulu War. There's a movie all about it. It's called Zulu. It came out in like the 60s. It's just 2 hours of guys in red fighting Africans. Crazy. We don't learn too much about the Zulus in today's lesson. But it's a fascinating movie, and it's on YouTube for free. If you want to, check out an in-depth look of imperialism in Africa in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Okay, so Africa, aka the Dark Continent, was the last populated continent to be dominated by Europe. I switched colonies with dominated. Regardless, it works. So it was called such because so little was known about it. It was a bit of a mystery. Now, trade on the west coast of Africa had begun as early as the 1500s. Like, remember when the Portuguese learned about them sailing down the coast of Africa and trading gold with the African kingdoms? So that wasn't really a mystery, but the interior was a pretty deep mystery. In the age of imperialism, the resource-rich continent of Africa was essentially, it became a contended commodity. People wanted it, and they were going to fight for it. Nations scrambled to basically carve out a piece of Africa for themselves. And we're going to go through all the different sections of Africa and what happened there. So North Africa was taken over mostly by France and Britain. In the early 1800s, the French took control of Algeria, and then Morocco, and then Tunisia. Over in Egypt, Europeans and Egyptians were building the Suez Canal, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, which you can kind of see here. The canal was completed in 1869 and then ended up falling under the control of Britain in 1875, and Egypt itself ended up becoming a protectorate of the British Empire, so kind of a puppet state under the military direction of Britain, basically a part of the British Empire. Now, over in West Africa, that was where the Portuguese had been, and they had been involved in European trade for centuries. The triangle trade, like slaves, and they go over to America, and then they make stuff, and then goods go back to England, and then goods go back to Africa. The triangle trade, that was West Africa, so it had been involved in European affairs for a long time. However, in 1833, Britain ended slavery, and the rest of Europe followed suit pretty quickly. And then over in the United States, it took like another 30 years in the Civil War for slavery to end. But regardless, despite the fact that the slave trade had essentially ended, there were still a lot of other good things in Western Africa, like timber and gold. So Britain, France, and Germany soon took control of most of West Africa, and then began working their way inland. Liberia ended up being the only free West African nation, as it was essentially a country founded by freed slaves from America. There was a project to basically give the freedmen their own country, and that was Liberia. That was back in 1847. In the 1890s, West African nations attempted to throw off their European captors, but they failed basically because the European armies had better weapons. Alright, moving to Central and East Africa, the European control of Central Africa began when the King of Belgium just claimed the Congo as his own, and he enslaved the people and basically forced them to harvest rubber. Now, this forced labor system of harvesting rubber in the Congo was allegedly so bad that missionaries in the Congo and other European powers involved in Africa forced the King of Belgium, I think his name was Leopold II, to surrender control of the Congo to the Belgian government. At which point the Belgian government ended forced labor, but it was still basically annexed by Belgium. Really weird. Other European powers essentially ended up dividing Central Africa and Eastern Africa into segments, which you can see here on this map. You'll note Ethiopia remained free because it was supposed to go to Italy, but Italy failed in conquering the Ethiopian people. So you ended up with two free African nations by 1914, Liberia, which was the freed slaves of America, and Ethiopia, who Italy failed to conquer, and the rest was split up among Portugal, Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, Spain, Italy, and that's it. Alright, let's talk about South Africa and the Boer War. So this is an interesting little nugget, and we'll explain why the South African Summer Olympic teams have white people on them, but they're in Africa. Well, it all began back in the 1600s. The Dutch set up a colony called Cape Town on the southern tip of Africa. It was like right around here. These colonists, these Dutch colonists, were called the Dutch word for farmers, which is the Boers. So now you have a Dutch colony, and the people there are called the Boers. And during the Napoleonic Wars of the early 1800s, Britain takes over these Dutch colonies, and basically the Boers kind of run away and form two new countries, the Orange Free State and the Transvaal. This is just fun to say, Transvaal. Now the British controlled the Cape Town colony, and it was run by a guy named Cecil Rhodes, who was a very wealthy man, owned a lot of mines in Africa. And he heard word in the street was up there in Transvaal, and the Orange Free State, there was more precious metals. So he wanted those precious metals, so he was going to take out the Boers, and you end up having the Boer War. It was a very bloody and costly war for Britain, because it is said that the Boers were very skilled marksmen and used guerrilla tactics, even after the British technically took over the Orange Free State, as well as the Transvaal. But eventual British victory in 3 years. Digging a little deeper, there's still, it seems, a lot of resentment about the Boer War, with one side saying the British Empire conquered the poor Dutch farmers to take their gold and fill their own greedy coffers, and the other side said that the Boers were unsophisticated, savage racists that needed a butt-kicking in order to free the African slaves. Remember, Britain had outlawed slavery in 1833. So there's two sides of this story, and I'd have to dig deeper. Already digging a little bit, I went, whoa, there's a lot more to this Boer War than were mentioned in this book. But I found, students, that the truth is often somewhere in the middle. So, to finish up South Africa, in 1910, Britain formed the Union in South Africa, where a mixture of British and Boers formed the government, and they did not allow the non-white natives to take a part in this government, resulting in the creation of the African National Congress that fought for the rights of Africans in Africa in the South African government. Now this is where you sort of transfer into this apartheid, segregated South African government, and you end up with like a hero that is Nelson Mandela, but that's not really part of our lesson. But if you'd like to learn a little more about it, now that we know what happened in South Africa, there's a short video here. 46 years of South Africa in 90 seconds. So what about America? What is America doing during all of this? The USA was pretty cunning when it came to its empire building. Not going for all-out invasion, but fermenting revolts and waiting for good opportunities. In the late 1800s, the USA gained control of the territory of multiple territories within Latin America and the Pacific. Spain still had control of the Caribbean, and Cuba. In 1895, Cubans began to revolt against the Spanish rulers. Now, in 1819, President McKinley of the United States sent the battleship Maine into the harbor to protect U.S. interests in the country. Now, the USA supported the revolutionaries. It didn't like Spain being there. And technically, they said the battleship was sent there to protect Americans living in Cuba. Well, the USS Maine blew up one night, and it sunk. The press said it hit a mine. Other people say that the U.S. were looking for a reason to start the war with Spain, so they blew up their own ship. It's possible it was just a catastrophic engine failure, just a coincidence. Anyways, with this happening, people that wanted war with Spain said, the Spanish blew up our ship, and now we have war with Spain. The war started. Regardless of what actually happened, the war did start. It lasted 4 months. We blockaded Cuba. We beat the Spanish up in Cuba for a little while, and Cuba ended up becoming a republic under U.S. protection. Generally resulting from this war, you also gained Guam, Hawaii, and the Philippines. by either fomenting more revolt or just taking it from Spain when we beat them in the war. We're not going to go into that much detail. Spanish-American Wars, when Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders gained their fame, and Teddy goes on to become president, which we'll talk about when we talk about the Panama Canal right now. After the war, now President Roosevelt pushed for the creation of a canal in Panama to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. At the time, Panama was part of Colombia, and the Colombians refused to give up any land to make a canal. In 1903, Americans helped the people of Panama to revolt against their Colombian leaders. Once again, strategically fomenting revolt. Once the people of Panama, with help from America, overthrew the Colombians, the Panamanians agreed to let America make the Panama Canal. Why is the Panama Canal a really big deal? Because now if you want to get a ship from the Pacific to the Atlantic Oceans or other way around, you don't have to sail all the way around South America. You can take this shortcut through a canal right in the center of Central America. That's a pretty big shortcut. Alright, that's our lesson. Quite a lesson. If we had tried to shove it in all in one day, whew, that would have been a lot. Your assignment for the day is to please answering the following question using complete sentences. What were the only two free African nations after 1914, and why/how did they maintain their independence? Alright, here's one right here. I think somebody tried to conquer them and failed, and there's another one over here that was formed by some people from the United States that may or may not have been in servitude before that. Wink, wink. Alright, that's it for today. Tomorrow we'll move on to lesson 2. Have a good one, and let me know if you need any help. I'm here for you. Alright, bye-bye.